Well, they're calling it a culture change when it comes to impaired driving in Saskatchewan. Some numbers were released recently, and this shows a big drop in deaths related to impaired driving in this province. 21 in 2019. That's more than half of the average for the past 10 years. Well, one organization that certainly advocates against drug driving and does it very aggressively is Saskatchewan Government Insurance, and Tyler McMurchy is head of media relations at SGI. Hi, Tyler.
Hi, Costa.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you about this culture change in Saskatchewan. What do you mean by that?
Historically, Saskatchewan has had an impaired driving problem. We've seen the headlines about having the highest number of impaired driving crashes, the highest rate of impaired driving incidents in the province or for the entire country. And this is something that needed to change. What we have seen over the past decade is those numbers coming down when we're talking about the people who are hurt and the people who are killed by impaired driving. And we saw in 2019 the lowest number ever recorded, 21 people who lost their lives as a result of an impaired driving collision. And as you mentioned, this is a very sharp drop compared to even the previous year, but also the 10-year average. Of course, 1 year isn't necessarily an indication that the problem is solved, but we have seen those numbers trending downward. We've also seen the numbers of injuries trending downward, and statistically that might actually be a better tell as far as what's been happening, because there are more injuries. So when you see those numbers coming down and coming down steadily over the past decade, that's something that's encouraging.
What would be the main reason for these numbers coming down in Saskatchewan?
I'm not sure you can really point to one reason, but if you had to, it would be drivers making better decisions. Now, what causes those drivers to make those better decisions, to decide that they're not going to get behind the wheel when they're impaired? A number of factors can go into that. We talk about education and awareness. You've probably seen a lot of the SGI awareness campaigns, be a good wingman, knock on the door, people shouldn't disappear. That's a big part of it, that you get those messages in front of people over and over again. Some people are going to be impacted by that. Other people might be affected, though, by the fact that there's more enforcement on the road. 120 additional traffic enforcement officers over the past 5-6 years in Saskatchewan, and a big focus of them is impaired driving. Another factor might just be the tougher legislation that's come in, longer vehicle seizures if you have an impaired driving offense, license suspensions, and of course there's been changes at the federal level as well, not just provincially.
Now, you alluded to your awareness campaigns, like Be a Good Wingman. I mean, SGI does put a lot of resources into that on an annual basis. What data do you have to show that that actually works?
Well, the data is in some ways anecdotal, but in some ways it's the numbers that we're seeing coming down, right? And when we put out a new campaign and you see that being shared, you see that being commented on, you know that it's having an impact on people. Of course, we could talk about the awards that these campaigns win, but really the biggest benefit to them is the fact that it seems to resonate with people. And when we put these campaigns together, especially in recent years, there's been a real focus on that emotional impact, because that old saying, people remember how you make them feel, right? And so when you tell a real Saskatchewan story, something that actually happened here, or something that could happen here, and you show the potential impact of making a bad decision to drive impaired, it can really hit somebody in the heart. And so we saw that, and we are so grateful, by the way, to the victims' families who have cooperated with us, to the first responders who have taken part in these campaigns and helped tell a real story about what can actually happen here in this province when you drive impaired.
So there are certainly encouraging signs out there in the battle against drunk driving. There's one age group, though, I'd like to focus on, because when you look at the numbers, it always spikes at between the ages of 19 to 30, where it seems to have amongst the highest average as far as charges go in Canada. So what's going on with that age group as far as SGI is concerned?
Well, so you need to hit people not just when they turn 19 and they're legally able to drink. You hit them before that too, and so you see that with the work that SGI does, and we partner with organizations like MAD and SAD to reach out to the younger groups. So this past year, within the last year, SGI and MAD have worked together for this a Smart Wheels bus that goes around and actually delivers programming to grades 4 to 6. So before children are even at the age where they typically start to experiment with alcohol. And then you move into the high schools, and there's a high school assembly program that MAD delivers to thousands of students in the province. There are SAD chapters in many high schools, and SGI does a lot of work with them. We have a community outreach team that goes around and to schools and to other community events and delivers there's a Driver X virtual reality simulator that you can get in there, and it's like being in the passenger seat while there's a driver who's high on cannabis driving, and you see the impact of that, and you end up in a hospital emergency room. It's very jarring.
So you put a fair number of resources and time into educating people before they get their license, but still those numbers are still high between 19 and 30. So how do you account for that?
Well, I mean, the people at that age are probably the most, or the least risk averse, I guess you would say. You know, when you're young, you're more likely to take chances, and you just got your driver's license. That's maybe the time of your life when you're the most social. You're going to find yourself maybe in situations where you have to make a better choice. You know, you have to decide that you're not going to drive impaired, and some people make good choices and some people still don't, and we know that.
So what has to happen to the messaging from the Government Insurance Corporation, or SGI, to get to them specifically, because they seem to be the cause of most of the problems on the road, is that age group?
Yeah, well, proportionally they are, right? Whether or not you're ever going to see the proportions come down, but if you're seeing the overall numbers coming down, and we are, right? We're seeing fewer people overall. You still have to go after the drivers who are making those bad decisions, right? And so if you're a new driver, you just got your driver's license, or you've maybe had it for a few years, you have to understand that if you're age 21 or under, you have zero tolerance for any drugs or alcohol in your system. And if you screw up on that, you're going to get your vehicle taken away for 3 days, your license suspended for 3 days, and there's going to be demerits that you will likely have to pay an additional financial penalty. Our messaging, you know, when you talk about our Good Wingman program, which is something that has many facets to it, but the original campaign showed 3 friends growing up from childhood into their young adulthood, and you know the commercial climaxes with a scene at a party where, you know, one friend is making the decision, I'm gonna go drive, and that their friends have to decide whether they're going to stop him or not. And there's actually 2 versions of that commercial, one they do and one they don't. And the one they don't, you see the impact of that. So we do have to tell these stories in a way that, you know, people can picture themselves in it. You know, the knock on the door campaign, for example, you hear from first responders about what it's like to roll up on a scene and be the first ones to see the aftermath of an impaired driving. And you see a commercial that shows a young family getting a knock on the door, and a police officer about to deliver the worst news that anybody could ever get. And if you can quite easily, as you know, somebody in your 20s, put yourself in those shoes. You can quite easily see with the people shouldn't disappear. You know, we profiled 15 people around the province who had lost their lives as a result of impaired driving, and this province is still small enough that a lot of people know one of those people. I know one of those people who lost their life in and was profiled in that campaign. And so when you tell real stories and you show the aftermath and what potentially results, and because it's not just about, you know, getting your vehicle impounded, getting charged, paying a fine. The real ultimate impact of impaired driving is people losing their lives and people getting grievously injured. And in many cases, injuries that will affect them.
Those are real life stories, as you say,
Yeah.
that actually have happened in Saskatchewan, and they touch a lot of lives. Just a bigger picture for Saskatchewan Government Insurance, and you are sort of the main advocate as far as fighting impaired driving, and you partner with third-party groups to get the word out. What's in it for SGI in being a part of this on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, And I just want to, I don't want to correct you, but mildly correct you. You know, there are many groups and many organizations, law enforcement, MAD, SAD, other safety organizations that play a very big role in improving road safety. For SGI, obviously, it's part of our mandate, but really road safety is part of our DNA, and it has been for the life of this company. And we want to see Saskatchewan's roads safer. It's part of our mission. It's part of our vision to have the safest roads in Canada. But also, if you think about it, SGI as an organization, it's made up of 2,000 people, most of whom work and live here in Saskatchewan. And you know, those are our friends and our neighbors. And many of us have been infected by impaired driving. Many of us hope that we will never be further affected by impaired driving. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Yes, we're an insurance company. We want to see fewer collisions. We want to see fewer people getting hurt and having to call upon the services of an insurance company for that reason. But honestly, the big thing is making our roads safer, saving lives, and preventing people from getting hurt.
You alluded to some of your campaigns, like Be a Good Wingman. What's down the road for SGI as far as awareness campaigns?
Well, we continue to, you know, look for not just. I mean, we're always going to be looking to tell people's stories, to tell real stories, and when it comes to the partnerships that we have out in the communities, whether it's working with the SJHL to talk about getting home safe from hockey tournaments, putting up posters in rural hockey rinks, working with the hospitality industry to have the wingman messaging in bars on coasters and other point of sale opportunities. It's all about, you know, expanding those partnerships, working with partners to continue to deliver the message, because as you said, this problem hasn't gone away yet. I mean, the fight isn't over. Not when we're still seeing, you know, 200 to 400 people arrested for impaired driving every month in Saskatchewan. It's still happening. So people.
How does that make you feel when you see those numbers come in?
Well, when you look at those numbers, you just understand that, like, the work isn't done yet, and we know that enforcement is very strong in Saskatchewan, and the police are always going to be looking for impaired drivers because, you know, even though the numbers have come down, it is still the leading cause of death on Saskatchewan roads. And it's also 100% preventable. There are 0 acceptable impaired driving fatalities. There are 0 acceptable impaired driving injuries. And so until we're hitting 0, you know, we're going to keep working at this. And this is a thing that we're going to keep talking about.
Tyler, thank you so much for talking to us about this. We appreciate it.
Always happy to talk to you, Costa.